Okay, here we are. We're on Nun Vav Amud Aleph. This Gemara is a little bit more difficult. We'll get through it just fine. Tan Rabbanan, it was taught. Ba'al Rabba, person wants to go ahead and square a city. So what we saw earlier in the Mishnah is that if a person has a circled city, so you don't want to actually just start counting the 2,000 amos from the circle. You want to square it first, make it into a square, and then you count the 2,000 amos from there. So the Gemara says, which square do you make? How do you make the square? So Meraba b'ribu olam. You do it according to the square, the directions of the world. Okay, so in other words, there's north, northeast, southwest, etc., as opposed to just like whatever square. You actually do it according to make a square according to the way that the world is, aligned. So, no saying tzfon tzfon olam. A person plays the north boundary facing the north of the world. Drom ladrom olam, the south of border facing the south of the world. V'simanech. And if you want to figure out which way is north and south, now we live in an amazing world. I just press my button on my phone and I see I have a compass. Or a person has a compass. They don't have compasses. So what do? Looked in the sky. So we're going to learn a little bit of astrology, things about nature. So Gemara says if you want to look up into the sky and see the different constellations, Egla b'tzafon, you'll see the constellation of the calf. That constellation is in the north. The Akrav, Bedarim, and the scorpion, or the tail of the scorpion, is in the south. Okay? So that's good if you know how to, read constellations in the sky. So if Yossi comes along and says, Omer, if a person doesn't know how to line the square with the directions of the earth, and maybe a person is unfamiliar with the constellations, so what do? So here he describes the different ways that the sun rises and sun sets. So, if I were to ask you, if you not pay, like myself, not pay that much attention, you would think, okay, the sun just rises in the east, sets in the west. It's not actually true. The sun's actually, the way it's perceived to us is like on a tilt. It's always on like an angle. And like longer days, there's going to be much more of an angle, okay? Sun setting, rising and setting. And on other days, it's going to be a much smaller angle. But it's not actually straight, okay? So the sun is not never rising exactly, or not almost never rising exactly east and going exactly west, but it's always going to be on an angle. So says the Gemara. So Merava Kaminat Kufa. So what you could do if you want to figure out where north and south is, you could look at the seasons. Kate said, what does this mean? The longest day and the shortest day, where the sun rises and sets, and the longest and shortest day, this is the north. Okay, so the sun rises and sets in the northeast, and the furthest point in the northeast, and it sets in the furthest point in the northwest in the summer. So if you say, hey, I want to figure out where north is, so I look on the longest summer day, if it's a long summer day, so I say, the sun is rising in that place, that's north, okay? Where the place where the sun rises and sets on the shortest day of the year, that is the south side, okay? So what that means is that it rises from on the north and the south, it rises on the southeast, and it sets in the southwest in the wintertime, the shortest time. Kufas Nisan, Kufas Tishrei, at the equinox of Nisan, the equinox of Tishrei, Chama Yotze b'Chatzi Mizrach, v'Shokas b'Chatzi Marav. Then the sun rises in the middle of the eastern sky, and it sets in the middle of the west. Nemar, as the pasuk says, Holich al Daram b'Soviv al Tzafon, Holich al Daram b'Yom b'Soviv al Tzafon b'Layla. Okay, so this pasuk over here, pasuk in Koheles, talks about the sun going up it goes to the south and it goes around on the north. What that means is that the sun is always the sun is actually always towards the south. Okay, it's always towards the south, and therefore the idea is that let's just pretend it's the south. So it's going to rise. Let's say rise in the east, go down in the west. And that's going to be in the south, and therefore, like under the world, from where we are standing, it's going to be going around the north side, right? Because if it's going the south, it's going to go on this side, which is the north side, overnight. Okay, Pasuk continues. Soviv holech haruach. It goes around, circling, traversing the directions of the horizon. This refers to the east and the face of the west. Sometimes the sun passes over them, and sometimes the sun does not pass over them, it goes around them. What this means is as follows, and here it would be very helpful if you have the art scroll, and you can see the pictures under you. If you see the diagram at the top of the second column, so you'll see in the summer, first let's look at the summer. So there again, we said sunrise and sunset is in the north. It begins in the north and it tilts south and it crosses the east-west line. Okay, it crosses the east-west line and therefore in those times it passes over them. In the winter, it starts right past the east-west. It starts past the east-west line because the sunrise and sunset is in the southeast and southwest, and therefore it does not go over the east-west line. And that's what it means, that sometimes it goes over them, passes over the east and west, and sometimes it goes around them, meaning it it kind of like goes under them when the sun is, so to speak, going under the earth. Again, from our perspective, that's what's happening. Okay, fine. Amar Misharshia. Leis Nulani Klali says this is actually incorrect. The sun actually never rose in the northeastern corner or set in the northwestern corner, like it was suggested in the Bryce just above, like Rav Yossi said. Nor did it ever set in the south, in order to ever rise in the southeastern corner and set in the southwestern corner. That never happened. Okay, meaning in the winter the sun always rises and sets north of true southeast and southwest, right? So in other words, assumption until now, and the reason that the bright, we said it quoted above, that sometimes the sun never goes over the east-west line is because we assume that it rises and sets in the southeast and sets the southwest. But now we're saying it's not true. Actually, it's always a little bit further. It's actually a little further north, and because it's a little further north, it's going to pass over the east-west line, and therefore it's incorrect to assume that the sun's never going to go over the east-west line. It does. Okay. Another somewhat complicated thing, and that is that there are seasons. Well, that we know, and the solar year is made of 365 days, and that are 6 hours long. Okay, and if you divide this into 4 parts, 4 seasons, each season is going to be 91 days and 7.5 hours. Okay, with me? So if you divide the year into 4 parts, the 4 seasons, each season is going to be 91 days and 7.5 hours. Okay, so with that in mind, Amar Shmuel. Okay, yeah, I think that's all you need to know right now. Yeah, let's see. Amar Shmuel, says Shmuel, Ein tkufas Nisan nofeles ela ba'arba rive hayom, that the spring equinox, spring does not fall only at the 4 quarter points of the day. So again, we're going to keep on measuring, right? So if it's again 91 days and 7.5 hours, and you're going to add that, okay, so that's going to be like the first season, okay, so whatever, the first season, then you add another 91 days and 7.5 hours, that's going to be the next season. And so he points out that it's always that the spring season, Nisan, which is what we're in right now, the spring season, only begins at the 4 quarter points of the day, meaning either right at the beginning of the day, okay, so either when the day begins, meaning like as soon as it's nightfall, as soon as it's sunrise, or the beginning of nightfall, or at midday, or at midnight. When it comes to summer, it only always begins based on all the math. I'm not going to go through all the math, but the point is, either it's going to begin at 1.5 hours or 7.5 hours into the day or into the night. Okay, so whereas opposed to Nisan, it's always going to fall neatly, at either the beginning of the day or at Chatzos, etc., beginning of the night or middle of the night, in the midpoint of the night, midnight. But when it comes to Tammuz, there it either begins at either 1.5 hours or 7.5 hours into the day or into the night. Tishrei nofeles, and Tishrei does not fall ela o b'shalosh shos o b'tesha shos, either in the 3rd or 9th hour, into the day or night. And when it comes to the winter, which is when Teves does not begin, either at 4.5 or 10.5 hours, into the day or into the night. And as we saw, as I mentioned, each season there's 91 days and 7.5 hours between them. And the beginning of one season and the next is always going to be 1.5 hour later. In other words, it's always going to be a half hour later that the time is going to begin. Okay, what that means is as follows. So there is this concept, I can't explain it to you, but there's this concept that there is a cycle of 7 of the planets, 7 of the visible, 7 bodies in the sky. And actually, a fascinating footnote, it says the word planet, where they say this, is somewhere over here, I remember seeing this, that the word planet, it comes from a Greek word meaning wanderer, because the planets in the sky, the visible things in the sky, what are the things that we could see from here without a telescope? Mercury, the moon, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, the sun, and Venus. Those are all things that we could see from here. There are other planets that we cannot see with the naked eye, but they are all rule over a certain hour of the day, okay? And it goes in a cycle. It begins with Mercury, and then the moon, and then Saturn, etc., etc. The 7th hour is Venus works, and then the cycle repeats itself, okay? So what the Gemara just said is that each season, and again, without going into all the math over here, because we're not going to do that, but each season, let's say season number 1, the spring, began in the beginning of Mercury. So like the beginning, because again, each hour of the day is ruled over by one of these celestial bodies, so one of these planets. So if let's say spring began at the beginning hour of Mercury. So summer is going to begin in the middle, in the half hour, or like the half point of Mercury, right? The half hour into Mercury. And then the next one's going to be whatever the next planet was. That was the moon. Okay, the next one's going to begin the moon, and that one after that's going to begin halfway through the moon. Okay, fine. Shmuel says, in Kufas Nisan Shenafelas B'Tzedek, when Nisan begins, when the spring begins and falls out in the hour of Jupiter, it ruins the trees when that happens. And it doesn't happen when Teves fall, the winter begins in the hour of Jupiter, which without drying out the seeds. Okay, so falling out of Jupiter is a bad thing. When the seasons begin then, and the Gemara qualifies it further, that's as long as the moon of the month makes its new appearance, what we call the mola. The mola is the new appearance during the moon, or during the moon hour, or during the Jupiter hour. If that happens, it's bad. It's bad in the spring, it's bad for the trees, and in the winter, it's bad for the seeds. Okay. Well, that is it for today, and that's it for now, actually, and we're going to pick up in a moment with 56b, and we'll see you then.